The first step that I took was probably a mistake that I see oftentimes new business owners make is thinking I'm productive because I'm working on all the behind the scenes things. So, I worked on like my website and I worked on, writing a policy and procedure before I even needed a policy and procedure. I worked on, everything but marketing, I'll say. And so that was a hard thing for me because even though I had all this business experience, I had always had like a marketing person I could rely on, but also too, the biggest thing was just the lack of mindset that I had. So I was nervous to put myself out there. I was nervous to, offer my services. I was nervous to put myself in a different way, just so that way I could draw in who my audience was going to be. I was nervous to tell other folks that I had started a business. So it was a lot of hiding behind the scenes. And I know when you first start your business, sometimes that can be one of the most challenging things to do is to get the clarity for what you're building, to have the courage to actually market it, and then to have the courage to actually say, hey, this is how I can help you. And then actually have the courage to say, this is how much you can pay me in order to bring in revenue.
Welcome to another episode of the Health Coach Academy podcast. I'm your host, Omar Cumberbatch of OmarCumberbatch.com. Appreciate you joining me as always. And just on a mention of that, I see a nice spike in listenership. So thanks for sharing this content. I really appreciate that. And anybody who's new to the show, who is just listening for the first time, welcome. I hope that you enjoy everything that we put out here because we really just are working on health coaches, really getting established out there in the business world. And I'm really excited for you to join our journey. So today we have another wonderful guest. Her name is Brandy Mabra, and she is the CEO and founder of SavvyClover.com. She has a lot of interesting information in the health coaching space because she has such a wealth of knowledge in the healthcare industry, and she is out there doing a lot of coaching for people who are trying to get their entrepreneurial journey off the ground. So I know that you're going to love her. So let's also keep the housekeeping going. Please leave a rating and review on iTunes. It helps me continuously get great guests like Brandy. So one of the other things that I want to mention, of course, is the course, right? So the course is out. It's the podcast creation course for health coaches that it's just a must have. So jump on my website, OmarCumberbatch.com, take a peek at the landing page. And if you know anybody who's interested in starting a podcast and boosting their business, tell them to take a peek, and we'd love to have them on board. Let's jump into the show. Hey, Brandy, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Good. I'm excited to be here. So thanks so much for us having this conversation.
Oh, no, I'm more excited than you are because you bring so much to the table, just in the terms of entrepreneurial journeys and really what you've been through. And so I'm really excited to kind of kick it off. If you can let's get to know you a little bit better. And tell us a little about your background and how you got started in this.
Yeah, as soon as I was born, I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I just knew it. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, it's funny you say that because one of my questions, because you're like a master problem solver. So I figured you figured it out somewhere along the way that you can make money off of it. But okay, that's not exactly the case. So I'll let you.
No, that's not the case. That's definitely not the case. But no, my road is very long and windy. And so essentially I come from a long line of healthcare. So my mom's a nurse, my nana is a nurse, my sister is in HR, and she works in a hospital system, and I have cousins and all the things. And so when I first started my journey, I knew I wanted to be in healthcare. So I actually started out on the clinical side of things. So I have a bachelor's in exercise physiology, and did inpatient, outpatient cardiac rehab and loved it, but always knew that there was something more. And so that was like the start of my career. There has to be more than this. There has to be more than this. Mm-hmm. So eventually that led me into moving here to North Carolina, where I'm at. And I got into practice management. And so I was really blessed that, especially when I was early in my career, I started like an internship program for a cardiology practice that I worked for and got some really great leadership management experience, and then took that experience to elevate my career. So at this point in time, I have 15 plus years of business management leadership experience building, growing, and leading multi-million dollar, practices. So with that, even during that journey, there was a number of times where I felt burned out. There was a number of times that I let my wellness go at bay, and even considering what my background was, I believe that oftentimes we are, with as much knowledge as we come to in the space, we are sometimes our worst enemy. And so just really from a career standpoint, same thing, there has to be more than this, there has to be more than this. And so eventually that led me to the long, windy path of starting my own business and being able to, I always said I wanted to own my days and be able to have my own schedule, be able to serve in a bigger capacity, and so I'm really excited that I'm at this point in time. But even this journey, even starting my business was hard. Like I started out in career coaching because I would always get asked, how I was able to, make over six figures, how I was able to get into the C-suite, especially as a Black woman. And so I thought like, oh, I can help others do the same. And so when I got into that, I realized that wasn't in alignment, with helping people with resumes and things. And so my true alignment was actually all the business experience that I've been able to gain over the years. And so at this point in time, I am able to help, business owners and private practice owners to essentially grow their businesses in a sustainable way, a profitable way that definitely serves them and doesn't leave them burnout just because of how many times I suffered from burnout throughout my career.
Yeah, interesting. So I'm curious if part of the burnout was because you weren't the boss.
Some of it probably did have to do with that, but at the same time, because I was in the position of being the leader, I had a boss, but at the same time, there was boss decisions that I could always make that I chose not to make. And so part of even the story, like if you hear my messaging, I always talk to the working the early mornings, the late nights, and the weekends. Nobody told me I had to do that, right? No one said that I had to burn myself out. No one said that you need to work all the hours, or you need to leave everything on your plate, or you can't hire this person, or you can't, empower this team member to help you, or you have to do this. I put that on myself. So I think some of it comes from a place of, even as I'm growing my business now, making sure that I'm owning the CEO mindset. So you always hear me say, owning your CEO status. And so as I'm growing my business, making sure that I'm setting myself up for success, because at this point in time, I do own my time. There's choices that I have that I didn't have necessarily without my career, but I can't say that it was because I wasn't in control, or I wasn't fully running the company, or I didn't have a board I had to report to for why I made some of the choices that I did.
Yeah, no, but definitely interesting lessons learned. So I definitely want to dive into your first steps, because it's really fascinating that you did not necessarily come from an entrepreneurial background. You got a lot of your experience during your career, and then you took that and built this amazing business. What was the first step that you actually took, and how did you feel about that specifically in that new territory that was probably foreign to you at the time?
Oh, the first step that I took was probably a mistake that I see oftentimes new business owners make, is thinking I'm productive because I'm working on all the behind the scenes things. So, I worked on like my website, and I worked on, writing a policy and procedure before I even needed a policy and procedure. I worked on, everything but marketing, I'll say. And so that was a hard thing for me, because even though I had all this business experience, I had always had like a marketing person I could rely on, but also too, the biggest thing was just the lack of mindset that I had. So I was nervous to put myself out there. I was nervous to, offer my services. I was nervous to put myself in a different way, just so that way I could draw in who my audience was going to be. I was nervous to tell other folks that I had started a business. So it was a lot of hiding behind the scenes. And I know when you first start your business, sometimes that can be one of the most challenging things to do, is to get the clarity for what you're building, to have the courage to actually market it, and then to have the courage to actually say, hey, this is how I can help you. And then actually have the courage to say, this is how much you can pay me. in order to bring in revenue. So I did everything but that.
You sound like me. So how did you get over it?
Oh, I mean, you have to at some point in time, something's going to come along. And so I was really blessed. I, had a talk with another business owner. And so we were going through and just talking about my business. And he asked me, he said, well, how much are people paying you? And I said, well, I'm just letting people just pay me whatever they want. And he's like, really? So he's like, you have to say a number. He said, I don't care what number you say, just say a number. So I remember my first number was like $134. And that was the number that I said. And it felt so uncomfortable compared to now what I get paid for the work that I do. But it's, it's a journey. It's definitely a journey. I know that there's like the money mindset part of it. So honoring like what your money story is, making sure that you are paying attention to, how you're showing up as you're talking about money. And just knowing that there are people who will always pay at every single financial stage, and so whether if it's 4 figures, whether if it's 3 figures, whether if it's, even in some of my colleagues, it's 5 figures and up. And so it just depends on how you feel about money, how passionate you are about your mission, I believe. And so what happened for me is I got really clear on what my mission was, what my vision was, and realizing that I deserved to have a space within my industry, and that me hiding and not saying anything or being shy about it wasn't serving anybody, especially me.
No, that's great insight. I'm curious too. Like you said the word mission, and when I hear mission, I always think that's like a bigger purpose than say having a niche, because that's kind of like, or niche, or whatever way you want to phrase it. I see they say niche gets you rich. That's where a lot of people are playing with that now. But what came first? Did you really know who you wanted to work with and then develop your mission, or it was mission driven and then you kind of fell back into that layer of it?
Yeah, it was mission driven, where I knew that I was supposed to do more than what I was doing. And I knew I was supposed to help people. And I knew that I wasn't meant to just be in a career that wasn't serving me. And so part of the work that I've had to do even is just clarity. And sometimes just starting out and working with the person that you think you're supposed to be working with, and seeing how that feels and seeing how that goes, helps you to actually step more into your mission. Right. And so over the years, at this point in time, I've had my business, it's going on, oh my gosh, almost 4 years. And so at this point in time, it's now very clear what my mission is, what my purpose is. I always knew once I got past like the career coaching that my business experience honestly was how I was supposed to help folks. And the reason why I've even gone through some of the experiences that I've had. But I think you have to always engage in that. So work with who you think you are meant to work with now. And that's going to show you maybe who your next person is. Right. And so it's really easy to read like, oh, just think about where your person shops, or think about your ideal person, or think about, the where they hang out. And sometimes you just don't know, because you don't really understand, where they shop at, or where they hang out, or what their problems are, or how you can help, or what the solution is, until you start to do conversations, right? Until you start to actively speak with people, until you actually start helping people, until you actively implement a solution for somebody and realize that, yes, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. And so a lot of it is just action taking. You have to continuously take action in order to get to the answer, to really know, like, this is my mission, this is my vision. And so even from a business perspective, and a lot of the work that we do with our clients, in the beginning, you might have your mission, you might have your vision, but that's going to change. And so you should always go back and review it. Am I still in alignment? What I'm doing, does it still make sense? Do I like what I'm creating? Mm-hmm. Does the business serve me compared to you serving your business, right? So part of the beautiful thing with us all having our own businesses is that we can run our businesses according to the lifestyle that we want to have. It's not the opposite. So oftentimes in that beginning space, you put yourself, like, you're creating almost what I call like a jail for yourself, mm-hmm. not realizing that at the end of the day, part of the job is to make sure that you're running the business and that the business is working around you compared to the business owning you, whether if it's through the people that you end up hiring or the people that you're serving, the schedule that you're implementing. All of those things can actually either play to your favor or cause you to be burned out really quickly.
Mm-hmm. It's quite a paralyzing position for many people, just to feel like they have to come up with everything immediately. And I really appreciate the way that you just say that once you take that action, something that, you take the first step, then the road starts appearing a bit. And I think that's one of the big key advice points that you've just given, and many other guests who I've spoken to speak on that as well. So I definitely appreciate that. So one of the things that I definitely wanted to dive into with you is because you are mentioning the portion where it's like you get too overwhelmed with all these things and you got into the weeds with a lot of different things. Can you talk about when you felt that you had to get like a team together and have support in this business, and what phase was that in, and do we have to run into it, and just a little bit about that?
Yeah, I hired sooner than probably most would in their business. And that was because I came from a place of being able to delegate, and I loved being able to delegate. And so when I first hired my person, it was within my first year. And I actually hired that person against my business coach's advice, just because I knew at this point in time, I knew what I wanted to create. I knew I wanted to get things off my plate. I hated the fact of working on things that were not in my strengths, like tech, even with like the website, or even some of the things with my email server, like all of those things, automations, like all that stuff I hated. Mm-hmm. So why am I doing that? Even with social media. So naturally I'm an introvert. And if you look at my social media, I look anything but that. But part of the reason why is because I have a team who helps hold me accountable. I have a team that pushes me outside my limits. And then at the end of the day, that's actually served me because it allows for me to show up more. It allows for me, like my business growth, like year over year numbers has just skyrocketed essentially. And part of it is because I took the leap sooner than what I felt comfortable for, in order to set myself up for success, because I knew that there's no way I could do it all by myself. I didn't want to. And I needed somebody for me to just to be able to have the life that I wanted to have. So I have a family, I'm a mom, especially coming from a place of where I was working, again, the early mornings, the late nights and the weekends. I did not want that. Mm-hmm. So the teammate that I hired actually didn't start off like full time. They started off working a couple hours a week. Mm-hmm. And that was it. And that was doable for me. I could maintain that. And so now at this point in time, she is like definitely my main person who I rely on 100%, but it's made it so much easier as we've done additional hires because I have this core person who has been with me for all these years. That makes my job so much easier. So I'm not in the weeds of my business, but it started at that earlier stage where it felt so uncomfortable to hire somebody, but it was such the right thing to do.
Mm. Yeah, no, listen, that's one of the things that I definitely have in common with you. There's certain things that I can't do, tech included. And that's one of the things that you don't want to let those things get in the way of what you're actually trying to do and frustrate you to a point where you just don't do anything. And that's why it's like delegation is really, really important. One of the things that I'm interested too about your story is the fact that as you're presenting this, you are becoming a brand. Was that intentional? How important is that for someone starting out to even consider something like that?
Oh, no, it was not my intention to become a brand. I knew it was important, but it wasn't my brand. But I think the more that you put yourself out there, the more that you are grounded in that mission, that purpose, you naturally just start to step into it. And so in the beginning, you start where you are, right? And so I know a lot of times it's like, oh, I want like the pretty photos and the logo and the letters and the colors. And no, like essentially the website that I had at the very beginning, I don't even have that website now. It's completely changed. Like my pictures have changed, the colors have changed, the fonts have changed, like all of that has changed.
Hmm.
And so honestly, it's not truly important, especially in those beginning stages. And then as you bring in additional revenue, as you're making more money, then you can start to evolve where maybe you're updating your photos, you're updating your website, you're now getting really clear on the fonts that you like or the fonts that you don't like, the colors that you want to have, like all of that. But it's all a journey and it's all a process. And then even from messaging, saying, the same thing. So we used to say, own your CEO role. And so then own your CEO role turned into now own your CEO status. And now, we have t-shirts, that our clients wear at our retreats. But not starting out, like I had no idea that was even going to evolve that way. It's just starting off with that one action and stepping into the vision that you have today and having the courage to do that, where all your answers will start to come, will show themselves. And so that will be when it comes to your messaging, the branding, the marketing, who you're really meant to serve, how you can serve them, the problems you can solve. Like it's just a journey. It's definitely a journey. I can't say that enough.
No, absolutely. So one of the things that I'm also interested about is obviously you have a knack for the ability to streamline processes and such, and to create a business that you could not be in the weeds all the time. Mm-hmm. How did that evolve? I know you'd mentioned delegation, of course, but there's obviously some kind of philosophy or outline that you have that you can recommend to people. I also saw on your website, you have this business health checklist, and there's so many things that you've been able to align to help make that process a lot easier. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that I do is I categorize our business activities. And I've done that with every practice that I've ever worked in. I do it now in my business. And so it's essentially, there's always 6 pillars of business excellence. And when you think about your business activities in this way, it just makes it easier compared to all of the things that can happen in a business that can be very overwhelming compared to if you're thinking about, oh, how is my marketing doing? Am I getting in front of enough people? Is our marketing in alignment? Do I actually have a marketing strategy? And am I talking about how I can help people? And so when you think about that, that's marketing. From a financial perspective, how much money do I want to make? How much money do I need to make? Do I have sound financial goals? How many clients do I need to see? How many visits do we need to have? And so essentially making sure that you have the right financial partners. That makes it easier to think about financial operations. Is there anything that feels clunky in my business? Am I in a place where things feel chaotic? Do things feel streamlined? When I work in my business, am I able to find things? If you have hired, is the team able to find things? How are workflows, the system that we have in place, like if it's an email system or if it's, maybe if it's an HR system, like whatever that system is, does that still serve us? Does it make our lives easier? If not, then, looking to make changes. From a practice experience standpoint or a client experience standpoint, if I were to ask, those we're here to serve, what would they say about us? What are they saying in the rooms that they're talking to? Are we getting referrals? Is there anything that they could potentially give us that might be bad feedback? Are we getting bad feedback? Are we asking for feedback? Right. And so that's the first 4. And then the last 2 would be team. So when you're in a place of hiring, making sure that you're checking in on your team, is it time for you to actually delegate, get some things off of your plate? Who do you need to have on your team? If you have a team, are they serving you? Is it time maybe to promote somebody? Is it time to fire somebody? Are you leveraging your team to the biggest capacity that you can? And then the last pillar, which is actually the first pillar, is the you pillar. And so oftentimes what happens, especially as you're growing a business, is you forget about yourself, right? And so if you're always in a place of being service minded, which we all are, we're all heartfelt, service providers, or heart-centered service providers, then oftentimes we forget about us. So making sure that you're taking the time to serve yourself, that you're looking at your energy, how am I showing up? Is it time for me to take a vacation? And is there anything big that's coming up so that way I can build in my self-care around that? Is there any additional support that I need, whether if it's a coach or if it's a therapist or, just making sure that you're looking at all aspects of the business. But instead of saying like, oh, I need to look at, all the things, maybe one day you're only focusing on marketing. Maybe another day you're only focusing on financials. Maybe another day you're only, you're making sure that you're set up for success, right? So it allows for you to take something that feels very complex and to break it up. And then essentially you're just reviewing, the metrics that might be happening in that, or the activities that you're doing within that particular pillar.
No, that's great. So I think my final question to you would be, where do you see this company going in the next 5 years? And a little bit about how you're going to make that happen.
Oh gosh, for my company, I am a household name when it comes to the healthcare space, the wellness space. And so especially when it comes to the business side, I know, and I can, not to sound cocky or anything like that. I know when it comes to my expertise, especially in the business and the leadership side of it, it's next to none because of just the amount of different types of environments I worked in, the healthcare systems that I've been part of, just some of the payers that I've, been part of. And so with that, my goal is to make an impact and to help, our clients be able to have a sustainable practice, because at the end of the day, we need those services. We need for our communities to be healthy. We need for our communities to thrive from a mental perspective, from a physical perspective, from an emotional perspective. And so part of my work in me being able to do that is for those businesses to thrive. And so if you don't have the business knowledge, if you don't understand how to hire, if you're frustrated, if you're burned out, I have a 7-figure client who wanted to sell her practice for $1, and so that's the space I don't want you to be in, right? I don't want you to have to feel like I have to get this up. And so that's the mission. And so we do that through, our CEO school. We do that through our retreats. We do that through just advisory services, our email newsletter, our social media. So there's so many ways that I want to make sure that I make an impact. And even as we expand, just broadening that. And so that way you have the skills that you need to be successful as you're growing and scaling your business.
No, that sounds fantastic. I wish you all the best in that. You're on the way, obviously. And one of the things, I'm glad that you kind of phrase it that way. I'm hoping that you could get some health coaches in there too, so that you can help with that mission, because we're really good at that. Do you come across many of us in your travels?
I do. I've been on a couple of different podcasts and things. And so we definitely are here for practitioners. And, and I definitely have certain practitioners that I attract. But I'm trying to expand that reach. And because I know my skill set can definitely help. And I would love to have some health coaches in my program. Absolutely.
Yes, excellent. I'm sure after the show, you're going to get a couple, because you definitely delivered today. So can you tell us how to keep in touch with what you're doing, your website, your social media handles, anything that we could do to keep abreast of all the good stuff you're doing going forward?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would love for you to go to my website. You already talked about our business health checklist. So that is www.savvyclover. So SAVVYCLOVER.com. So there's a business health checklist waiting there for you to help you with your 6 pillars of business excellence. Also there, we host a monthly seminar, 2-day seminar called Scale Your Practice. And so we dive into some of the business side of things when it comes to your business. So there's that if you would like to register for that. And then, of course, you can hang out with me on Instagram, and that's at Savvy Clover Coaching.
Awesome. Brandy, you've been fantastic. Really appreciate you jumping on the show today. I hope you have a great rest of the day.
You too. Thank you so much for having me. It's been fun.
Hope you enjoyed listening to today's episode of the Health Coach Academy podcast. If you did, jump over to iTunes and leave a rating and or review. It goes a long way in helping get this message out to our fellow health coaches and people in our industry. Also, if you can, jump over to my website, omarcumberbatch.com, where I give out a lot of freebies, including my 5-day sugar challenge for people who are having issues with sugar. And also for health coaches, I have the book, Hidden. It's the 6 not so obvious ways to get your clients unstuck. Have a great day.